Welcome to Chapter 2 of American Government and Politics. In Chapter 1, we built a vocabulary: politics, the state, the regime, power, liberty, and the great ideological traditions of the modern world. With that vocabulary in hand, we can now start asking specific questions about the United States. And the very first question is: what is the underlying political culture of this country? Because before we can understand American institutions, we need to understand the values that those institutions are designed to express. So, in this lecture, we'll define political culture and we'll explore why it matters for everything that follows. Political culture is a set of shared ideas, values, and beliefs that define the role and limitations of government and the relationship between citizens and that government. Political beliefs and values are the primary forces that determine the political priorities and political responses of ordinary citizens. This means that a purely rational cost benefit analysis cannot fully explain why people vote the way they vote or why some political ideas catch fire while others go nowhere. The political culture is, in a sense, the political personality of the average citizen, and the political reality of any nation can only be understood in relation to it. Political culture is more than the formal laws and official norms of a country. Most of what makes up a political culture is unwritten. It lives in habits, in stories, in practices, and traditions. These are passed down from one generation to the next through socialization. And the political theorists of the 19th century, Alexis de Tocqueville above all, called them habits of the heart. Most people never sit down and study them objectively. They simply absorb them and then they view the world through their lens. For Americans, the Constitution is a useful example. It is a legal document, yes, but it is also something more than that. Americans treat it as quasi-sacred, and any attempt to change it requires not just legal procedure, but the genuine moral support of the American people. A classic illustration of this comes from President Franklin Roosevelt in 1937. Roosevelt was at the height of his political popularity. His New Deal programs were transforming the country, but the Supreme Court kept blocking key pieces of New Deal legislation. So Roosevelt proposed and asked Congress to authorize adding more justices to the court. He was within his constitutional rights to propose it. The court is not fixed at 9 by the Constitution itself, it's fixed by statute. But the public reaction was outrage. Even Roosevelt's own Democrats turned on him. The proposal collapsed. Why? Because the value of an independent judiciary was deeper in American political culture than any policy preference and even deeper than partisan loyalty. The lesson is that political culture sets limits on what a government can do, even when the formal rules don't. Political culture, when it contributes to the stability of a political system, is not easily altered, but it is not unchangeable either. Profound economic crises and major social upheavals can shift it. In Roosevelt's case, the public eventually reached a new equilibrium. The New Deal programs were preserved. The independence of the court was preserved. The American system stabilized with minor adaptations in the face of a real crisis. And that, in fact, has been a pattern repeated again and again in American history. The system bending, but not breaking. Now, American political culture diverges from other Western democracies in significant ways. It is built around values that limit the power of government, a disposition that comes from a unique historical fact. The United States was the first modern republic with a written constitution. Before the American Revolution, the idea of a limited government grounded in rational liberal principles was, frankly, a utopian dream. The American founding turned that dream into a working political order, and in doing so, it established a model that has influenced constitutionalism around the world. American political culture is also marked by the diversity of its subcultures. It is woven together from political narratives that vary dramatically across regions, across racial and ethnic communities, across religious traditions, and across socioeconomic groups. The most catastrophic fracturing of that culture was the American Civil War, which exposed the deep incompatibility between the values of the Union and those of the Confederacy on slavery, federal power, and the very organization of society. So when we study American political culture, we have to study two things at once: the unifying themes that hold it together and the persistent internal tensions that have always pulled at it. Now, a 2026 update on American political culture. Scholars have documented a dramatic intensification of cultural and political polarization in recent decades. Studies by the Pew Research Center show that the ideological overlap between Republicans and Democrats, which used to be substantial, has nearly vanished. By 2024, partisan identity had become the single strongest predictor of Americans' views on issues from COVID-19 policy to immigration to climate change to the legitimacy of elections themselves. Political scientists like Liliana Mason in her book Uncivil Agreement and Ezra Klein in Why We're Polarized argue that this is not simply ideological sorting, it is identity-based polarization. Party affiliation has fused with racial identity, with religious identity, with educational background, even with geography. The result is a political culture in which the shared assumptions that once made cross-partisan conversation possible have significantly eroded. So that's the concept of political culture, and a first look at what makes the American case distinctive. In our next lecture, we'll dig into the foundational values themselves: liberty, equality, self-government, and limited government, and see how each one shapes daily American politics. I'll see you there.